Hello and welcome to IMHO. Today I'm talking about what SEOs should know about brand marketing with Mordy Oberstein. The recent Google Documents leak offered an important look behind the scenes. And from all the analysis and discussion following the leak, the one insight that really got my attention was just how important brand is. When I spoke to Pedro Diaz last time on IMHO, he said that we need to focus more than ever on building our own communities with users aligned to our brands. Recently, Mordy posted on X/Twitter that he's a real advocate for building a brand online. You said, as someone who has straddled the brand marketing and SEO world for the better part of 10 years, branding is a lot harder than many SEOs would think and will be a huge adjustment for many SEOs. So, what does brand and building a brand mean? And what do SEOs need to know about brand to start to make this mindset shift? In your honest opinion, Mordy, can SEOs even make this shift? So throwing this over to you.
Oh, wow. Okay. A lot of meat to chew on. So I think first off, brand building basically means creating a connection between one entity and another entity, meaning the company and the audience. It's two people meeting, and that convergence is the building of a brand. It's very much a relationship. And I think that's what makes it hard for SEOs because it's a different way of thinking, and it's not linear, and it's not easy to see, and there aren't always metrics that you can measure it by. It's like almost like gauging like your relationship with like a family member. Like, how well is it going? Well, I have a metric that tells me that my mother loved. No, like you kind of have a sense of things. You have a finger on the pulse, and that sort of dictates how you're operating and what might be the next step. And I'm not saying you don't use data or you don't have data, but it can never really tell you the actual full story. I don't think it can in SEO either, but it's much harder in this scenario. And I think another thing that also makes it very, very difficult for SEOs, if we're very much, let's try it out and experiment. And you can do that in branding, but you have to be a little bit more careful because the mistake is harder to fix. So if I, for example, screw up whatever, I don't know, I have a bad title tag and a bad header and a bad this, and I see that Google's not into it, my rankings are declining, I can reverse course, or I can try something new. When you're working with creating a dynamic, or you're really creating associations to your brand, and you're creating sentiment among your audience, once that's set, or once that's starting to be set, reversing course is not as easy. And that's literally why I have had a job at Wix initially. Is that there was a bad reputation, and fixing that was not easy. And as much as they tried, we had to take a different route with it. It's very hard to course correct. I'm not saying it's easy in SEO, but it's much harder in branding.
It's a really good point you make, actually, because you can spend years and years and years building a brand, and it only takes one small slip up, and it can be wiped out overnight.
Yeah, it's really difficult, and it's also much more latent, right? You're trying to pick up on latent signals. You're trying to send latent signals. A lot of the conversation is very unconscious. It's not like, oh, I will say this to the audience, and now they will think this. It really all compounds. It's all the micro things that you're doing, all the micro signals, all the micro moments. It really all compounds on itself to create an impression, just like it does with a regular everyday relationship. So you really have to be thinking about just what you're doing. How is it positioning you? What kind of signal is it sending? If I write this piece of content, I was looking at something today, actually. It was around accountants, and all the websites around this software vertical were all doing the same thing. They were all writing about like, what is a tax return? If I'm a professional accountant and I'm going to look at this software and I see your blog and it's asking, what is a tax return? I know why they're doing it. I can see the SEO there, right? Oh, that's a great term. 4 million people are looking for this, blah, 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 blah. And then all of the software, all the SaaS companies around this vertical, they all do the same thing. But if I'm in a professional account and I show up and what you're writing about is, what is a tax return? I don't think you're relevant for me. You're sending me a signal that you're very basic. I don't need to know what a tax return is. I have a master's degree in accounting. Like, I don't need to know that. So the latent signals that you're sending can be very subtle, and they're a very different way of thinking than normal like SEO stuff.
It's really interesting what you're saying there, actually. I mean, I think it's been for quite a while. People are talking about this whole shift away from keyword first approach, right? We're going to have to sort of shift our entire mindset. When you're thinking about a brand, you're not just targeting high volume keywords anymore. You're actually putting your user front and center. I mean, we should be doing this anyway, putting your user front and center as to what is it they want to know, what is going to engage them, interest them, and entertain them. But I'm sure you probably there's going to be a payback on that. In fact, in your post that you said on X/Twitter recently, I think you said that SEOs might have to accept getting less traffic and clicks to establish them in the right position. And so, how does an SEO justify and sell this to their clients and stakeholders? How are they going to measure success?
It's funny because I think you'll have a harder time as time goes on, especially in larger, more active organizations. You'll have a harder time selling the SEO stuff. And if you don't come at it from a brand point of view, I think you might be missing the room, because I think brands are going to be worrying about brand because of things like AI and differentiating themselves and blah, 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 blah. That if you're coming at it from a pure performance point of view, I think you might be missing the room. But leaving that like aside for a second, I'm not saying that you should be satisfied with less. I think you should be satisfied with more targeted, because branding is very targeted. Like, I don't think it's good branding to say like we're the ultimate solution and blah 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 blah. Being the ultimate solution is generally not a pain point. There's usually a particular need that you need to fill, and you shouldn't be talking about like, we have the ultimate solution. Is we have the solution to X because X is your problem. So you're just being a little bit more targeted. So the quality, while the overall traffic might go down, I think you should be worrying more about the quality of that traffic and how relevant it is. But still, let's talk like in pure numbers. Yes, you might get less traffic now, but the idea is to gain a digital presence and create digital momentum that results in more traffic in the long term over time. So I would say, yeah, you might need to take your foot off the gas pedal now, but that's only for the sake of getting more later.
So, I mean, for SEOs who are completely addicted to traffic, it's all about clicks and traffic, right? How to exist without it. What can we do? How can we start to take this shift across from going basically, saying we're going from here to here?
I don't think, I mean, this is going to sound pessimistic. I don't think we're going to, or I don't think that we can without help. I think like every time you have something where like, that you just can't, like a habit you can't break out of, you usually need like an external like thing. You change my diet. You're like, I don't want to check. The doctor said if I don't change my diet, I'm going to die. So I'm going to change my diet now. I think it's one of those kind of things where the ecosystem around us is going to change, and it's going to force us to focus a little. I don't think the leaks are going to say to SEOs, you know what, I better focus on brand now. But I think it's going to be the ecosystem shifting, and I think it's going to be C-level coming in and saying, yeah, that's great. I don't care about the overall traffic numbers. I care about is like, what's the user really doesn't appreciate what we're doing for them, and they see it as being generic, and they see it as being basically like everybody else. So you brought me the traffic, but you really diluted my presence. Why did you do that? I think that will force us to change.
See, it's interesting, really, because if we look at this, it looks a lot to me like SEO is going to completely shift across to marketing. I mean, do you think the industry is going to really segment into? I mean, I think technical SEO, right, is always going to be important, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
You're always going to need that foundation to make sure there's technical accuracy. But other than, and I think paid search as well is probably, paid programmatic is probably going to become even more important now. But in terms of all those people that are left, I think for me, I'm kind of seeing it as we're going to be left with this specialist who's kind of a brand content strategy hybrid strategy role that's going to straddle those disciplines. And then maybe sort of the traditional, what we thought before of a traditional SEO, is going to fall away. I mean, where do you think the roles might develop?
I totally agree with that. I was talking with Crystal Carter. We were, before we have a podcast before we were like, riffing, before we were riffing, not rifting, riffing. We were actually totally agreeing. We were riffing that when we say like SEO is dead, I don't think we mean like SEO is dead, but I think that it's shifting to what you're talking about. I saw Nick Leroy post on X this morning. I think he was retweeting Glenn Allsop, someone, I forgot what it was. But the basic point was that maybe SEO traffic shouldn't be like your main traffic segment, but should be an addition to or an accent to your overall digital presence kind of thing. And Nick was retweeting like, yeah, that's what we do for the SEO job. That's my approach to SEO jobs. I put all my eggs in the SEO basket. I think you're starting to see that. I think you're starting to see like SEO traffic is part of a wider scope or part of a wider paradigm, and it really does kind of sit under comms and brand in a lot of ways.
You see, it's really interesting because to me, that sounds a lot like marketing. It sounds like a
Yeah,
marketing role. So
yeah,
is it that SEO is just going to become absorbed into marketing?
I think so. And outside of like the technical SEO, I don't think that's marketing. I think that's the health of your website. I put that more aligned with like web development more than I do like what we're referring to as SEO right now. Obviously, it is SEO. It might be more SEO than what we've been talking about, but I see that as something like way, way, way on one side of the spectrum, and what we're talking about on the complete other side of the spectrum. And I agree. I think it ends up, I think it already is in most organizations. That kind of SEO is under marketing, and it is functioning as part of the wider marketing. How are we driving revenue? How are we driving growth? What kind of growth are we driving? And using SEO as a vehicle to that. That's definitely a marketing schematic.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you completely. I just know looking back historically, there's always been that
Right.
conversation as where does SEO sit? Does it sit under the sort of IT or does it sit under marketing or sales? You know, it's always struggled to find its position, hasn't it? Maybe this is where we finally find our position and perhaps gain some more credibility for what we
That's
do, I think.
We need more credibility, and we also need a bigger rift between the technical SEOs and the content SEOs. That's always good for the industry.
Do you think? Do you think it is?
No, I think it's
Oh, you get me every time. And then just really quickly before we finish, obviously, I one thing I just want to throw in here, I really don't think we can mention branding without talking about social media. Is social media part of SEO? It's always sat to one side, hasn't it? But is it going to become more important?
I think so. I think first off, you're talking about purely from the leaks, like the mentions and that kind of, and the traffic and the Google using Chrome to analyze traffic patterns and blah 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 blah. Then for sure it is. If you're looking at the leaks like very linearly, I always like my line is Google is like a moth. It's attracted to whoever has the biggest digital light, and creating that digital light, that digital momentum, whether it's like they're directly using blah blah blah, like the leaks are saying, whatever it is. Social media is a huge vehicle for really building up that momentum and building up that presence. And I think that presence and that momentum can be leveraged for SEO. It is leveraged for SEO, 100%, in my opinion. I don't have any proof,
Well,
but I mean, outside of like the sites that I've worked on and have seen that a gazillion times. I see it like I'll tell you, like you could see, and this is where I think if you want to get a little bit like technical, how does that work? Right. The more active I am on social media, the more branded searches. I have people searching for Mordy Oberstein, which is what you find is
mhm.
probably not what you want. Um, but I can see the correlation between that. And I don't think that Google is ignoring branded searches. If they keep seeing like vacuum cleaner, Dyson over and over and over again, they're going to make that semantic connection that Dyson is what people
Mm.
are looking for when they want a vacuum cleaner. So I
Yeah.
do think in that case, like that's a very specific way that I think social media can directly factor into the SEO equation.
Mm. Yeah, well, I'm going to wrap up there, Mordy, because we're just about out of time. I mean, I could carry on and talk about this all day, but the whole idea was to have a small coffee-sized bite chunk that somebody can just take 10 minutes out of their day to listen to. So thank you very much for sharing your humble opinion. I always say honest opinion, but apparently it's humble opinion. Thank you for sharing your humble opinion, and it's really good to talk to you. Thank you, Mordy.
My pleasure. Thanks.